Well, joining us now to break down the numbers, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, Senior Advisor to America First Policy Institute, Brian Morganstern. Brian, good to see you.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me on. Great to be with you.
You bet. So here's an interesting thing that, as a non-economist, jobs person, that I don't get. So the economy adds 559,000 jobs, right? You would think that that's good news. The president came out and said it's good news. But a lot of economists came out today and analysts and said that's not a good number. Why is that not a good number?
Well, it's a great question. The reason is because it missed expectations, because the government is paying people more to stay home than they would earn at work. And because this administration has been drawing out the process of getting kids back in school, making things more difficult on parents, that creates an even bigger incentive for people to take this enhanced unemployment insurance that the government is paying instead of going back to their jobs. Now, when I was in the administration, it was a crisis. We wanted to keep people connected to their jobs. We wanted to provide liquidity really in a time of uncertainty. Well, now the vaccines are out thanks to warp speed and President Trump's leadership. Now we see economies across the country getting open again. It's time to stop paying people more money than they would earn at work to stay home and live off the government. And that's why you're seeing this month missed expectations, last month missed expectations in colossal fashion, and the month before that was revised downward. So we got to get our policies in order to incentivize work. This administration is not doing that, and that's why they're not hitting what the economists think they should be hitting.
Well, Brian, you do have 24 red state governors taking your advice. They've refused to enhance $300 unemployment benefits. But then you have New Jersey Democratic Governor Phil Murphy saying this. Listen.
Perhaps it's due to that somewhat to the $300 premium. I think that may be part of it, but I actually believe it's a combination of things. I think it may be daycare. We're not entirely full on in school, so you've got some realities of taking care of your kids.
All right. So one, he's agreeing with you in part, saying, yep, these benefits are not helping, but also people are staying home because their kids are not fully in school. So why not just fully open the schools again? Isn't that the solution?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm glad to see Governor Murphy agreeing with me on a couple of points. When I was in the administration, we agreed on very little. So finally, we're finding some common ground. He also made a comment, however, that he thinks businesses should just pay more and compete with the government. I mean, that is one of the most out of touch things I've heard in a long time, because these employees, these members of the labor force who are kind of on the margins that we need to get back to work, are often working for retail businesses. You know, I saw in some of the coverage signs at like Wawa stores where they're providing these incentives to try to get people back, to try to pay them more. But we're talking about businesses that operate on very small margins, and increasing dramatically their costs of the workforce only compounds the difficulties they've had because of the pandemic, where they were closed for their customers for months on end. So a comment like that is just completely out of touch and a punch in the gut to small business owners. Really, we have to get the schools open, and we have to stop paying people more to stay home than they would earn at work.
It's amazing how many signs I see, A, for help wanted, but B, then note how much they're willing to pay to get people there, or the bonuses, because the government, you're right, is getting in the way of this. But I want to switch gears and ask you something really interesting that I still don't entirely get myself, so I'm hoping you can break this down to us. As I understand it, our current corporate tax rate's at 21%. Biden proposed putting it at 28%. And in these negotiations he's having with West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito, he's now saying that he can agree on 15%. Am I misreading this? Because I don't get why he would go down to 15 and or why the Republicans wouldn't grab that number.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Sean. So in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as you note, the tax rate went to 21%. But there's a couple of pieces of this. And really the minimum tax piece, not to get too wonky, it's something called GILTI. And it really plays into negotiations we're having with the Europeans. GILTI is an acronym, and it refers to taxes paid by multinational corporations. Now, the Europeans are trying to get American companies to pay more that 15% number is up from a 10% number that's part of those negotiations. This is actually a concession to the Europeans that would make the American job market less competitive, but it sounds good in a talking point. So it's actually very sly with what the White House is doing.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about this before we go. Biden has proposed a $6 trillion budget, and that doesn't even include the trillion he's proposed for infrastructure spending. But what is the impact of all this spending on Americans' wallets?
Well, it's a great question. And ultimately, we have now fears of inflation, which are going to have a real impact on consumer confidence, a real impact on the buying power of the American people as we continue to recover from the pandemic. And ultimately, it's the debt that's going to be borne by our children and grandchildren. Look, we had an explosion of the debt and deficit when we had to spend trillions of dollars. Again, a year ago, we didn't know where this was going. We needed to provide emergency liquidity to job creators and to families, and we did that. At the same time, we invested in vaccines and things that would get us out of this trouble. Unfortunately, I think what we're seeing from the Democrats is, number one, they're exploiting a pandemic to push through some radical left spending priorities. And two, in the infrastructure talks, Sean, you referenced them, Lindsay, you referenced them. Look, if the Democrats were actually willing to stick to infrastructure and roads and bridges and perhaps rural broadband, one or two other priorities, I might believe that compromise is possible. For now, it seems like it's really just compromise theater so that the Democrats have some air cover from their friends in the media to then ram through a leftist version that includes climate change and other priorities that really don't involve infrastructure.
I agree. I think Republicans are getting taken for a ride on this. Brian, thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend and look forward to seeing you soon.
You bet. Thanks very much. Nice to talk to you.